Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a truly fascinating chain reaction. We're going to look at how a few 18th century dictionary choices, along with some highly specific cultural quirks, rippled all the way through time to literally break 21st century software. Now, you might think language is just about communication, right? But in the digital age, language is code, and when that code doesn't align, things break. Okay, let's dive into this with what sounds like a totally absurd question. Why on earth could a simple game of soccer completely crash a $1 million application? Seriously. Well, the answer takes us on this wild journey from linguistic trivia straight into modern software localization failures. We're going to connect the dots between how fans talk in a stadium to why software developers are pulling their hair out trying to make apps function globally. Section 1. The illusion of shared language. Now, what's really interesting about this is we usually just assume the US and the UK speak the exact same language. But the cracks show up the second we write anything down. Consider the origin of these differences. Color, favor, labor in the UK versus color, favor, labor in the US. Words derived from Latin that entered English through early Old French originally kept that our ending in the UK. But across the Atlantic, the US completely dropped the U, creating this permanent rift in our keyboards. And this divide just keeps going with word endings. You've probably noticed British words often end in a consonant followed by an unstressed think center or theater. Meanwhile, modern American English heavily prefers the phonetic ending. And these aren't just typos, right? They're systemic rules. But how did these rules become so rigidly split? For that, we need to look at two men who basically decided how we type today. Section 2, Webster versus Johnson. So long before we had autocorrect to fix all our mistakes, dictionaries were the ultimate arbiters of truth, and these two authors had vastly different agendas. If we jump back in time to 1755, Samuel Johnson published his dictionary, setting the British standard. Then, decades later in 1828, Noah Webster published his American dictionary. Johnson relied heavily on Norman French spellings, while Webster, on the other hand, popularized simplified, etymology-based spellings for the United States. As Samuel Johnson perfectly captured, he actually favored those R spellings because, well, as he put it, the French generally supplied us. Noah Webster had a totally different view. He pushed for color without the U and center with an ER as a logical simplification, but also as a deeply nationalistic move. He wanted the newly independent America to have its own distinct, independent language. Which brings us to Section 3, separated by sports. And this brilliantly illustrates how our language split evolved way beyond just the alphabet. If you want to see how wildly our everyday vocabulary diverged, just look at a sports stadium. In the UK, a fan throws on their kit to watch a match played on a pitch. But in the US, a fan puts on their uniform to watch a game played on a field. We are describing the exact same human activities, but using a completely different set of data points to do it. Then you have a word like gridiron. Now, in America, this strictly defines the football field itself, literally named because the parallel lines make it look like a grill. But humorously enough, Brits actually use gridiron to refer to the entire sport of American football, mostly just to distinguish it from what the rest of the entire world calls football. It goes even deeper. Even the way we describe winning is completely different. When an opponent scores exactly 0 points, an American team gets a shutout. But over in the UK, a goalkeeper who lets no goals in is said to keep a clean sheet. It's a totally different metaphor for the exact same statistical outcome. To add some real cultural flavor here, consider the word blighty. This is an affectionate term for England herself. Actually, it was massively popularized by homesick soldiers during the World Wars. A lad from Blighty stepping into an American sports bar would just find the terminology completely alien. In fact, to that British fan, hearing an American call the beautiful game soccer or hearing that players wear cleats instead of boots, well, it sounds like absolute bollocks. It's total nonsense to them. We basically have two cultures, completely confident that their specific vocabulary is the absolute correct one. Let's move on and see how this all builds up, because this is where the explainer gets incredibly relevant for our modern world. What happens when these deeply ingrained historical and cultural quirks literally collide with modern global technology? I mean, what happens when bollocks hits a computer screen? Section 4, the digital consequence. Right, so those linguistic differences, they're not just fun trivia for your next pub quiz. They are a massive, expensive headache for software developers everywhere.
And this brings us to something called localization testing. According to experts at QA Test Lab, this is the complex process of checking if software functions correctly across different languages and regional formats. Creating a global app is just filled with hidden pitfalls because the code absolutely has to adapt to the culture.
So the crucial point is this. Think about the British word program ending in MME. That's 9 characters. The American program is only 7 characters. A simple spelling difference, literally a choice made by Noah Webster 200 years ago, means the exact same phrase requires text boxes of entirely different sizes on a mobile app. If developers don't plan for this, the text physically breaks the user interface.
And honestly, it goes way beyond just the physical size of text boxes. Think about the computing itself. Various countries use wildly different formats for writing out dates, times, and numbers. If an American app processes a British date format improperly, it doesn't just look a bit weird, it literally crashes the calendar, it miscalculates the bank transfer, it corrupts the whole database.
The folks at QA Test Lab actually outline these 5 frequent localization defects perfectly. Number 1, incorrect text displaying. That's the program box sizing issue we just talked about. Then you have numbers 2, 3, and 4, failing to recognize, process, or save data with strange symbols, like unique currency markers. And finally, number 5, improper computing of time, dates, and money. Samuel Johnson and Noah Webster didn't just give us different dictionaries, they directly caused the exact software failures developers are still patching today. And that really leaves us with a fascinating and maybe slightly terrifying question. We've seen this incredible ripple effect, right? How an 18th century dictionary choice and a few sporting terms literally dictate the layout of modern UI design. So if history breaks today's apps, what current cultural quirks, what modern slang, or new emojis are going to completely crash the globalized technology of tomorrow? Definitely something to think about the next time you type out a quick message. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.